Search teams had returned once again to a remote area near Anna, Texas, a small town located just north of Plano. Interestingly, this location had already been searched earlier during the investigation. At that time, however, like many other places combed through by authorities, the area had revealed nothing. No signs, no evidence, no answers. But this time, something had changed. Close to a construction site, hidden among the thick brush and patches of open land, a discovery was made. Human DNA were discovered. Scattered nearby were several pieces of clothing, worn and weathered by time and the elements. Forensic specialists were immediately called in. Working with urgency and precision, they began the process of collecting and analyzing the evidence. It didn't take long for DNA testing to deliver the heartbreaking confirmation. It was Christina Morris. Dear viewers, thank you for choosing our video and our channel. We put a lot of effort into making sure you enjoy being with us. Today, we're exploring the tragic true story of a crime involving 23-year-old Christina Morris. Her father, Mark, described her as someone who thrived in social settings. From the time she could talk, she loved being part of the group, an outgoing, upbeat spirit who made friends easily and often took the lead when others hesitated. If there was a group project, she raised her hand first. If someone needed help, she was usually the one who showed up. That charisma never left her. It simply matured with age. Her family situation, while a little more complicated than most, was also filled with love. Her parents divorced when she was a baby, but Christina didn't grow up feeling fractured. She grew up feeling supported. Her dad remarried, and she was raised mostly in home alongside her stepmother, Anna, and several siblings. But her bond with her mother, Johnny, remained solid. In fact, Johnny called Christina the love of her life. When Johnny remarried to a man named Ronnie, it added even more warmth to the dynamic. She used to say that it was like having two sets of parents instead of a broken home. In her words, she got lucky. After earning her degree in marketing, a field she was both skilled in and passionate about, Christina landed a job at an online dating service, a role that suited her people skills well. It wasn't just a job to her. She was genuinely interested in human connection, how people met, and how relationships formed. She had just received word that she would be transitioning into the photography department. Photography and visual design were passions of hers. She loved capturing candid moments, curating color schemes, editing with precision. It gave her both creative fulfillment and career momentum. She felt like things were finally starting to line up. On the personal side, Christina had been in a serious relationship with 23-year-old Hunter Foster. They had known each other since the 7th grade, and their connection spanned over a decade, moving through the awkward phases of adolescence into young adulthood. Recently, they had moved in together into an apartment in Fort Worth. Hunter, an aspiring model and actor, had spent time in New York chasing his dreams, but was now back in Texas. It seemed like a new chapter. But as many know, transitioning from long-distance love to everyday life under one roof can be a challenging shift. The couple was going through a difficult patch. Hunter wasn't working at the time and had been going out quite a bit, attending parties and staying out late. Christina, on the other hand, was working hard, shouldering most of the financial and emotional responsibility. It created a tension between them that neither one seemed quite ready to solve. Their love was real, but reality had started to test its limits. Friday, August 29, 2014, marked the beginning of Labor Day weekend. In Texas, that often means high spirits, group get-togethers, and plenty of social plans. Christina had been arguing with Hunter earlier in the day. The tension had reached a peak, and from her car, she called her friend Taylor to vent. She confided in Taylor about her doubts, whether she and Hunter were really on the same page, whether this life they were trying to build together was sustainable. Taylor, in that moment, became the grounding voice Christina needed. They talked it through, and Christina decided she wouldn't let the argument define her night. She needed a break, a reset. She wanted to be surrounded by friends, to laugh and let go for a few hours. She snapped a quick selfie in her car, capturing that quiet determination in her eyes. the kind you have when you're trying to shake off the weight of your day. She then set out on the 45-minute drive from Fort Worth to Plano to attend a small high school reunion. Familiar faces, no expectations, just a chance to breathe. The gathering began at the apartment of Polina Petrosky, a longtime friend from high school. From there, Christina and a small group, Polina, Sabrina Boss, and Enrique Orochi, went out to the shops at Legacy, a trendy entertainment district filled with restaurants, bars, and late-night energy. They first went to Henry's Tavern, then made their way to a place called Scruffy Duff. It was a casual, joyful night, and surveillance cameras caught the group walking down the well-lit streets at 11:35 p.m. Christina was smiling. Later, they returned to Paulina's apartment, joined by a few more former classmates. According to those present, people were definitely intoxicated, but Christina had kept her drinking to a minimum. She wanted to stay in control, just in case she needed to drive back. Still, her mood had taken a hit. She was visibly distracted, her thoughts drifting back to the argument with Hunter. People said she was quiet at times, then suddenly more animated, then withdrawn again. Her emotions were clearly fluctuating. At 2:12 a.m., Christina sent a text to Hunter. She couldn't find her keys and asked if he could come get her. But he was out himself that night, drinking with friends in downtown Dallas. He didn't see the message. Christina tried again, sending more texts, her words growing more emotional each time. She was feeling rejected, alone, and possibly even foolish for reaching out. Still, she held on to the hope that they could talk things through. At one point, she considered staying the night at Paulina's, but ultimately changed her mind. Eventually, she found her keys. Her phone was nearly dead, its battery icon blinking in warning. Still, she sent one final message. "I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Why can't you talk to me? Good night. I hope you're okay because I'm not." With that, she left Paulina's apartment and started walking to her car. It was just before 4 a.m. By this time, the night was winding down completely. People were starting to crash. The buzz of conversation had quieted. As morning approached, some guests from the party began texting around to make sure everyone got home safely. But Christina wasn't responding. Her phone was now off, going straight to voicemail. That was unusual. Christina had a work shift that day. Friends hoped she might simply be sleeping in or rushing through her morning routine. But the evening came and went without any sign of Christina. Her scheduled shift passed by unnoticed. At least, unnoticed by her, because she never showed up. No call, no message, not even a quick text to explain. At first, her coworkers were puzzled, then slightly annoyed. Christina was known to be dependable, if a little spontaneous. But this was out of character, and everyone sensed it. Still, they waited. Maybe she'd overslept. Maybe she was dealing with something personal and would reach out later. But then, the next day arrived, and she missed her shift again. This was now 2 unexcused absences in a row, and people began to worry in earnest. Her close friends, uneasy with the silence, reached out to her mother, Johnny. Johnny hadn't heard anything from Christina either. That silence spoke volumes, and it triggered a deep, unfamiliar sense of dread within her. Something felt wrong, not just slightly off, but deeply wrong. Concern mounting, Johnny tried calling Hunter, Christina's current boyfriend. He didn't answer. She then called Mark, Christina's ex-husband. To her relief, he picked up, but her hopes were quickly dashed. Mark had no idea where Christina was either. He sounded genuinely surprised and concerned, but he couldn't offer any useful information. By early Saturday morning, at approximately 3:45 a.m., detectives took the step of visiting Paulina's apartment. Paulina had been one of the last people to see Christina that night. She told them what she knew, that Christina had left the building with a man named Enrique Orochi. Paulina mentioned that Christina had parked her car in the structure across the street that night and gave them directions. When detectives arrived at the parking garage, they found the vehicle exactly where Paulina had described, parked on the first floor, securely locked. That alone was deeply concerning. If Christina had returned to her car, she would have likely driven home. But the vehicle was untouched. When Mark and another friend, Anna, arrived around midnight and were allowed to open the car, they found it empty. Christina's phone wasn't there. Her bag was gone. Nothing appeared disturbed. No broken glass, no forced entry, and no signs of a struggle in the surrounding area. The ground nearby was clean, unmarked, undisturbed. It looked as if the car had simply been left there and forgotten. But everyone knew. She had never made it back to her car. Whatever had happened to her took place somewhere between Paulina's apartment and that garage. Paulina recounted to police that Christina had departed her apartment late that night in the company of Enrique Orochi. But once they exited the building, Paulina said she had no idea what happened next. Naturally, detectives pressed her further. "How well did you really know Enrique?" they asked. The truth was, not very well at all. Paulina explained that she had only met Enrique a couple of months earlier. They shared a tenuous connection. Both had attended the same school years earlier, but that was about it. They weren't friends. They hadn't kept in touch over the years. He was more of a familiar face than someone she genuinely knew. The only reason he had even been invited to the get-together was because it was a sort of casual school reunion, and Paulina had decided to be inclusive. Once investigators had a name, they tracked down Enrique and gave him a call. To their relief, he answered and agreed to speak with them. Enrique expressed a willingness to cooperate, though he admitted that his memory of the evening was blurry at best. He told officers that he had consumed quite a lot of alcohol, approximately 10 shots, along with 5 or 6 beers. He said he spoke to Christina briefly during the evening, but not in any significant way. As the night wore on, he claimed, the details became foggier. He noted that when he mixes drinks, he sometimes experiences blackouts, during which large chunks of time simply vanish from his memory. According to Enrique, he and Christina did indeed leave Paulina's apartment together. But he claimed they parted ways as they reached the end of the apartment complex. He said Christina walked off alone, heading in another direction, and that was the last time he saw her. He recalled that as they were parting, she was on her phone, seemingly in a heated conversation. He overheard her raise her voice but didn't catch the details. It appeared she was arguing, possibly with Hunter, her boyfriend, since they had been having issues earlier in the day. This led detectives to explore whether Hunter might have been waiting nearby, or if there had been a confrontation between the two. But he hadn't contacted her that night. He hadn't filed any kind of missing person report either. When detectives spoke to Hunter, he explained that he had assumed Christina had gone to stay with her parents, or maybe got in some kind of minor trouble like a DUI. He also mentioned that he had lost his phone while out that night, which, he claimed, explained why he was unreachable. He admitted he was distracted by other personal matters and wasn't as attentive as he should have been. However, when police obtained records from Enrique's phone, a curious detail emerged. At 3:50 a.m., a call had been placed to Hunter's number. It was followed by 2 text messages, one at 3:53 a.m. and another at 3:55 a.m. Investigators believed that Christina had likely borrowed Enrique's phone in a last-ditch effort to reach Hunter. But what was said in those texts remains unclear. When detectives asked Hunter to let them examine his phone, he declined. He said he didn't feel comfortable handing it over and asked if he was free to leave. While technically he had the right to do so, his response was suspicious, especially considering his girlfriend had now been missing for several days. Still, detectives considered the context. He and Christina had been arguing, and perhaps he simply wanted space or was acting out of confusion or stress. What he was saying was, on the surface, plausible. And further investigation seemed to back that up. Police contacted friends who had been with Hunter that evening, and their accounts matched his timeline. Cell phone pings and bank activity placed him far from the Plano area. None of the evidence suggested he had left Dallas. Later, it would be discovered that Hunter had been involved in an entirely different situation that night. Ironically, the illegal activity ultimately served as an irrefutable alibi, confirming his whereabouts and effectively eliminating him from the suspect list. That explained his unwillingness to hand over his phone. He wasn't hiding something about Christina's disappearance. He was hiding a federal crime. The police went back to square one and returned to the partygoers, Enrique Orochi. Initially, it hadn't made much sense. Enrique had been one of the last people seen on camera with Christina that night, but people who knew both of them said there hadn't been anything remarkable about their interaction. In fact, most said Enrique had barely even acknowledged Christina at the party. According to those who were there, his attention that night had been focused almost entirely on someone else. Another guest named Sabrina, the fourth person captured alongside Christina, Paulina, and Enrique in the 11:35 p.m. footage walking toward the bar district. Still, something about the timeline didn't sit right with investigators, and it became especially clear when they spoke with another party guest, Stephen, a friend of Christina's who had been keeping tabs on her after she left with Enrique. Stephen called Christina approximately 10 minutes after she and Enrique had walked out, just to check whether she had safely reached her car. Christina answered, telling him they were almost there. Her voice sounded normal, not overly worried, not hurried. Importantly, this indicated that she had not been walking alone, as Enrique would later claim. She was still with him at that point. Just a few minutes later, Stephen sent her a follow-up text, asking again if she had made it safely. But this time, there was no reply. The message turned green. That detail, while seemingly minor, told investigators a critical piece of information. Christina's phone had either powered off or lost service, and it had happened within minutes of her last communication. Investigators turned back to surveillance footage. Unfortunately, the camera near Christina's parked car had one major limitation. It only activated when motion was detected. It did not record continuously, which meant they didn't have a complete visual record of every movement in the lot. What they did have, however, was this. No footage showing Christina arriving at or entering her own vehicle. Her car never left the parking lot. It simply remained there, undisturbed. But just 3 minutes after the camera's last activation, a different car did leave the lot. Enrique's. That detail changed everything. It ruled out the possibility that Christina had driven away by herself. The only logical conclusion was that if she left that location at all, it had been in someone else's vehicle. And based on the timeline, that vehicle almost certainly had to be Enrique's. Investigators combed through footage from every other possible exit. Only one other car was seen leaving the lot around that time. A rideshare vehicle. Fortunately, this driver and his passenger were easy to locate. Both willingly confirmed their identities, provided their trip history, and matched cell phone pings with surveillance footage, confirming their complete separation from the case. That left Enrique as the only remaining unaccounted for vehicle. With this new information in hand, police brought Enrique in for a second interview. This time, they came prepared. They laid out a detailed map of the parking lot and asked him to walk them through exactly where he and Christina had gone. Enrique repeated his earlier statement, that he had parked in a different section altogether and that he and Christina had parted ways before reaching the lot. But detectives had already reviewed the footage and knew this wasn't accurate. When they showed Enrique the video, clearly placing him and Christina walking together toward the same part of the lot, his demeanor shifted. The confident tone he had maintained began to crack. He appeared surprised, caught off guard, and paused for several long moments before adjusting his story. He now claimed that perhaps they had walked to their cars together after all. He said he might have forgotten because of how late it was, and because the events of the night were somewhat blurred. He added that he may have moved his car earlier and didn't realize how close they were parked. It was a soft reversal of his initial statement, but investigators noted the inconsistency. Even so, without definitive evidence placing Christina inside Enrique's car, police had no grounds to detain him. When detectives asked to search his vehicle, Enrique hesitated. He said he had an important business meeting the following day and needed to keep the car clean and accessible. When pressed further, he finally agreed to allow a limited inspection. During that search, officers noticed several things. The car had recently been vacuumed and cleaned, thoroughly. Any trace of dirt, debris, or personal effects had been wiped away. When asked about visible scratches on his body, Enrique claimed they had come from repairing his vehicle. And while police did observe the dent he referenced, they had not obtained a full warrant to conduct a deeper forensic search at that time. Once again, Enrique was allowed to leave. Officially, he was not considered a person of interest. Not yet. The case, however, was intensifying. Police were still waiting on a full analysis of phone records, data that might show whether Enrique and Christina's devices had traveled together after leaving the lot. If the two phones pinged off the same towers after 4 a.m., it would strongly suggest they had remained in proximity, lending more weight to suspicions. Meanwhile, public concern was growing. 5 days had passed since Christina had disappeared, and there were still no signs of her. The search effort was enormous. Helicopters and drones were deployed over the Plano area, sweeping fields, wooded areas, and nearby construction zones. Volunteers joined police and family members, forming search parties. Flyers were handed out by the dozens at shopping centers, gas stations, intersections, anywhere people might pause long enough to take one. Yet there wasn't a single confirmed sighting. No personal items found, no leads from the public. Everything now hinged on the cell phone data. Finally, results began to come in, and what they showed raised even more questions. From the time Enrique and Christina were last seen walking toward the parking lot, both of their phones continued to ping off the same towers for a significant period. That data placed them in the same general area, even after Enrique had claimed they had separated. It was a development that investigators could not ignore. Despite this, Enrique continued to maintain his innocence. In fact, he went so far as to speak publicly, giving his version of events to local media. He calmly repeated that he had nothing to hide, that he was just another party guest trying to enjoy the night. At the same time, Hunter Foster, Christina's boyfriend who had already been cleared, also spoke out. He remained in contact with Christina's parents and gave interviews to express his heartbreak. He said he was overwhelmed with guilt, convinced that if he had simply answered his phone or gone to pick her up that night, everything might have turned out differently. By early November of 2014, over 2 months after Christina Morris had vanished without a trace, investigators in Plano made a significant and public move. The name that had quietly hovered in the background of the investigation was now front and center. The Plano Police Department officially named 24-year-old Enrique Orochi as a suspect in the case. Initially, they clarified that Enrique was not, at that time, being accused of directly harming Christina. Instead, he was being formally charged with interference in the investigation, a serious allegation indicating that he had likely misled investigators or obstructed their search in some form. But behind closed doors, authorities were already pursuing a far more critical breakthrough, one they believed would come from Enrique's vehicle. This time, they had obtained a full warrant, not just for a surface inspection, but for a complete forensic examination of Enrique's Chevrolet. With the help of crime lab technicians, police meticulously searched the car from bumper to bumper, swabbing surfaces, removing interior panels, and using specialized tools to collect potential DNA evidence. And the search paid off. The results changed the course of the case. Christina Morris's DNA was found inside the trunk of Enrique's car. It wasn't just trace contamination or a possible accidental transfer from shared space. The quantity and pattern of DNA found were significant. According to the forensic report, it was present in multiple locations, in a concentration that definitively ruled out casual contact. Investigators concluded that she had, at some point, been physically inside the trunk of that vehicle. The revelation led to Enrique's immediate arrest. His bond was set at $1 million, an amount reflecting the gravity of what police now believed had taken place. While the charge at that time was aggravated kidnapping, investigators made it clear that their working theory was much darker. Christina had still not been found. No activity had appeared on her credit cards, social media, or phone. There had been no contact with anyone. Given those facts, police were now presuming she was no longer alive. At Enrique's parents' home in Allen, Texas, investigators carried out a second search, one that stretched well into the night. In December 2014, Enrique was officially charged with aggravated kidnapping, and a grand jury moved forward with an indictment. Prosecutors made a difficult but calculated choice. Without Christina, a murder charge would be nearly impossible to pursue in court. The aggravated kidnapping charge, however, carried the weight of a first-degree felony, and under Texas law, it could result in a life sentence. Despite the mounting evidence, Enrique pleaded not guilty. The trial was scheduled, and both sides began preparing for a complex legal battle. The lead prosecutor later described the case as one of the most difficult of his entire career, primarily because the most central piece of evidence, the victim, was still missing. Without a definitive cause of death, the case hinged on circumstantial evidence, behavioral patterns, and forensic details. Enrique chose not to testify in his own defense, a decision well within his rights, though one that invited speculation from observers. By the time the trial neared in 2016, 2 years had passed since the night Christina had been seen on surveillance footage, walking toward a parking garage in Plano. That image remained the last confirmed sighting of her. And while investigators believed she had been abducted and later lost her life, they still lacked clarity about exactly what had happened after the cameras stopped recording. In the courtroom, pre-trial motions flew back and forth. The defense filed challenges to the admissibility of cell phone data, arguing that tower pings lacked precision. Another motion sought to suppress DNA evidence, questioning chain of custody and testing procedures. But the most difficult obstacle facing Enrique's legal team was, in fact, his own behavior after Christina disappeared. He had participated in multiple police interviews, giving inconsistent stories. He had also spoken with local news outlets, making statements that were later contradicted by surveillance footage and phone records. These interviews were scrutinized during trial, with prosecutors framing them as calculated attempts to mislead. Two primary theories emerged from investigators and prosecutors, both rooted in the belief that Enrique had made an unwanted advance toward Christina the night she vanished. The first theory proposed that the confrontation occurred at the car, just moments before they would have parted ways. According to this version, a physical struggle might have taken place, resulting in the large dent on the side of Enrique's Camaro. The second theory carried more weight in the eyes of the prosecution. It was based on the narrow window of time between Christina and Enrique walking into the parking garage and Enrique driving away, a span of just 3 minutes. In this version, Enrique may have offered to drive Christina back to Fort Worth, and she accepted, unaware of any threat. But something changed during that ride. Perhaps she noticed he was driving the wrong way. Perhaps an argument began. Or perhaps Enrique made an advance that Christina rejected, escalating the situation rapidly. Her father, Mark Morris, later spoke with heartbreaking honesty about what haunted him most. He explained that Christina had a severe fear of the dark and was deeply claustrophobic. Even as an adult, she sometimes needed to sleep with the lights on. The thought of her being trapped, alone, and afraid was unbearable to him. In a terrible twist, her family believed she might have felt safe with Enrique walking her to her car that night. After all, she had known him since high school. That trust, however faint, may have cost her everything. Enrique, meanwhile, continued to imply publicly that Hunter Foster, Christina's boyfriend, might have been involved. Even after Hunter had been cleared, Enrique suggested he was being unfairly protected. In a strange turn, Hunter himself was arrested just a week before Enrique's trial, this time on an unrelated charge involving conspiracy, to which he ultimately pleaded guilty. That arrest did cast a temporary shadow, but Hunter cooperated fully with the prosecution. At trial, Hunter took the stand, answering difficult questions about his relationship with Christina. He spoke about their arguments, his regrets, and how devastated he was that he hadn't responded to her text the night she disappeared. But he was also adamant. He had nothing to do with her disappearance, and no evidence ever contradicted that. His willingness to testify, despite his own legal troubles, gave his statements added weight. After weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal argument, the case went to the jury. For 2 days, they deliberated behind closed doors, combing through every document, every photo, every contradiction. and on September 2016, they returned with a decision. The verdict: Enrique Orochi guilty, aggravated kidnapping, a first-degree felony. The sentence: life in prison. It took Judge Mark Rush only a few minutes, moments heavy with the weight of justice and sorrow, to deliver the sentence that would permanently change the lives of everyone in the courtroom. Throughout this, Enrique Orochi remained largely expressionless, though at times his behavior revealed more than he may have intended. Observers noted how he often looked away, rocked in his chair, and on more than one occasion appeared to smirk as grieving family members addressed him directly. By Texas law, a life sentence requires an inmate to serve at least 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. For Christina's family, the number felt both too long and not long enough. 30 years until he might walk free. Yet it could never match the lifetime that Christina lost. After his sentencing, Enrique exercised his right to appeal. He requested a new trial, claiming that errors had been made in the legal process. The court reviewed the request, but ultimately denied it, affirming the original verdict. The case was closed in the eyes of the court, but not in the hearts of those who loved Christina. From behind prison walls, Enrique later agreed to a limited media interview. In it, he said, "I want to apologize to the Morris family for not being able to help them." But when asked to elaborate on what had happened the night Christina disappeared, especially after the two were last seen walking toward the parking garage, he declined to answer. He simply refused to speak about that pivotal window of time. In the months and years that followed, the Morris family refused to let that question remain unresolved. They searched every single day. Her father, Mark, could often be seen walking through remote brushland in North Texas, alone, through blistering heat, storms, and biting cold. With nothing more than printed maps, hiking boots, and a determination that bordered on superhuman, he combed through wooded trails, empty fields, and forgotten roads. He wasn't looking for closure. He was looking for his daughter. Meanwhile, Christina's mother, Johnny, had made a monumental decision. She gave up her job and relocated across the state, making the search for Christina her full-time priority. Every day, she scoured maps, coordinated volunteers, organized search efforts, and chased down tips, no matter how vague or improbable. Then, in March 2018, nearly 4 years after Christina's disappearance, investigators received a call. Search teams were returning to a rural area in Anna, Texas, just north of Plano. It was a location that had actually been reviewed earlier in the case, but like many places at the time, it had yielded no results. This time, it was different. Near a construction site tucked among brush and open ground, human DNA were discovered. Clothing items were also found nearby. Forensic teams worked quickly to analyze the evidence. DNA testing confirmed what Christina's family already feared in their hearts. It was Christina Morris. She had finally been found. The announcement brought a tidal wave of emotion. The grief was still raw, but there was relief in the certainty. After nearly 4 years of questions, of torment, of imagining countless possibilities, Christina was no longer missing. She had been found. She could be brought home. From a legal perspective, Enrique Orochi was already serving life in prison. And because he had already been sentenced to the maximum penalty, no additional time could be added to his sentence, even if murder charges were brought forward in light of the discovery. While a trial for homicide remained theoretically possible, it was unlikely to change his fate in any material way.